Hi, it's Katrina. You've seen them in ancient art, but have you ever noticed this? From Sumer to the Americas, ancient gods and figures are holding the exact same mysterious object. What is it? And what does it reveal about a secret connection between civilizations across the globe? That's not all on the menu for today, so let's get to it. What's with the handbags? Oh yes, the good old days when woolly mammoths roamed the earth and humanity still hadn't figured out pants. During this era of shameless pantlessness and hairy behemoths, someone somewhere carved a handbag into stone. And then someone else carved the same handbag, and then another and another, over and over until the same handbag was adorning the walls of structures across the world. These handbags have been popping up in ancient carvings from Iraq to New Zealand and Turkey to Mexico, like history's weirdest game of Where's Waldo? But why? Let's travel backwards in time to 11,000 BC to a place called Göbekli Tepe, where hunter-gatherers were hard at work building the world's first temple with zero tools from Home Depot. And on one of its ancient pillars, there are not one, not two, but 3 stone handbags carved above depictions of animals and gods. Let's ditch the ancient past and go into the less ancient past, to 880 BC, to the kingdom of Assyria, located in modern-day Iraq. Boom! Here we have another handbag. Archaeologists found an identical handbag to the one at Göbekli Tepe being carried by a very serious-looking unknown deity. And if we creep ahead just a smidgen more to 400 BC, the Olmecs of Mesoamerica were busy carving gigantic stone heads across the jungles of Guatemala. And can you guess what else these mysterious humans were carving? That's right, handbags. But what is it really? It doesn't make sense for it to be an actual purse. Is it a portable herb garden? A basket? A metaphor? How deep does this mystery go? At least as deep as New Zealand at the bottom of the world. In Māori mythology, there is a story about a hero who traveled to the realm of the gods and returned with 3 sacred handbags full of divine wisdom. Would that be the same wisdom collected by the Mesopotamian gods, the Olmecs gods, and the deities of Göbekli Tepe? Many scholars believe the story of divine wisdom being passed down to humans through gods is universal, spoken of in all ancient cultures because, ready for the bombshell? Because it really happened. Gods from the heavens descended from the clouds and bestowed humanity with the fruits of life. And by that, I mean the wisdom to start civilization, build cities, practice math, and cobble together written language. You know, the basics. Wisdom was stored in these bags or satchels and then shared with humanity. Ancient alien enthusiasts really love this theory since the gods perhaps were not gods at all, but aliens that came and shared with us their advanced wisdom. The bag was a vessel full of knowledge. Not everyone is convinced of this ancient apprentice program. These handbags were symbolic. With everything ancient people knew about the cosmos, these bags carried by gods and carved into temples and walls were cosmic symbolism. The square base represents the earth, and the curve of the handle represents the sky, with the gods holding them up and keeping the balance, uniting both earth and sky together. These bags are always held by gods or mythical beings, usually part of a bigger scene telling us a story. So it seems they were used mostly in religious or spiritual areas. But if this is the case, does this mean that all ancient civilizations came upon the same symbolism? The Olmecs in Mexico had the same square earth and curved sky handle as the Sumerians? That's why others think the handbags are evidence of shared knowledge or influence between distant ancient civilizations. They may have been carved as a sign of passing the bag of knowledge from one culture to another. We don't really have a definitive answer, but which theory do you like the most? These handbags are some of the most mysterious symbols on the planet, and this is just the beginning. And now for a quick break because it's shout out time. I'm going to give a big thank you to Mystical Lay and Liam Collins for supporting this channel. Thanks so much for watching. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out. Another Sphinx. In Asia, high on a rock in the thick, steamy jungles of Sri Lanka stands a beast of stone so fierce it once stared down kings. It's known as Sigiriya, which roughly translates to Lion Rock. And believe me when I say this is one of the most important ancient sites in the world. Sigiriya is a jaw-dropping ancient citadel perched over 600 feet above the ground. The only way up is by practically crawling up some very old and very worn stairs that hug the mountainside. At the foot of the stairs are a pair of paws. They look suspiciously similar to the paws of the Sphinx. The Sphinx, the one in Egypt. Could there have been another Sphinx? Was Sigiriya secretly connected to the pharaohs of Egypt? That's what some conspiracy theorists are saying. Tragically, only its colossal paws remain. This place is old, although not quite as old as the Sphinx. The rock fortress dates back to about 1,500 years ago. No one knows what the body or head originally looked like. Speaking of ancient enigmas and colossal cat statues, let's turn our attention to Egypt. For as long as Egyptology has been a thing, scientists have attributed the creation of the Great Sphinx of Giza to Pharaoh Khafre, the guy who also built the Great Pyramid of Giza. But more and more scholars are starting to disagree, like Robert Schoch, who threw a wrench into history class by pointing out that the Sphinx is badly damaged by water. The physical proof is the Sphinx's body itself. You can see thousands of years worth of water damage, as if it stood on a rainy Irish hill instead of the hot, dry Egyptian desert. The historical timeline simply doesn't add up. Sigiriya only deepens the mystery. According to the history books, King Kashyapa I, who ruled from 473 to 495 AD, built this huge fortress to flex on his brother. But Robert is proposing a different theory. What if he didn't build it at all? And what if Pharaoh Khafre didn't build the Sphinx? What if both King Kashyapa I and Pharaoh Khafre showed up, saw a giant cat-like statue, and claimed it as their own? Because why not? If you think that sounds crazy, I'd like to introduce you to something called archaeoastronomy. It's like if Indiana Jones majored in astrophysics. It's a scientific combo of archaeology and astronomy, just how it sounds. Robert Bauval and Graham Hancock have used archaeoastronomy to support their theories. They figured out that the pyramids in Egypt align with Orion's belt, while the Sphinx lines up with the constellation Leo. It could be a coincidence, but in the late 1990s, a bold thinker named M.S. Fernando found that the major stupas near the ancient city of Anuradhapura in Sri Lanka seem to mirror the stars Rigel, Mintaka, and Bellatrix. And where can you find those stars? In the constellation Orion. That's two ancient places, two cultures whose only tools to map the stars were their own eyeballs, and they were both made to mimic stars in Orion. The same two cultures also appear to have carved a gigantic cat statue, or they found the statue and claimed it as their own. So, does Sigiriya make you question world history, or did they just both happen to love powerful big cats? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. When India came knocking, was Australia really isolated for 45,000 years? Once upon a time, roughly 4,000 years ago, some very bold voyagers set sail across the sea from India and showed up in Australia. No boarding passes, no GPS, no Google Translate. How the heck did they do it? Scientists are shocked at this incredible revelation. This isn't a conspiracy or a theory. It's real, and it completely flips the script on the long-standing story that Australia stayed in total isolation from the rest of the world for tens of thousands of years. Newsflash, guys, it didn't. Ancient Indians managed to reach Australia, and now, today, all these years later, about 11% of the genome in some Aboriginal Australians can be traced back to Indian migrants who arrived around 2000 BC. How crazy is that? And DNA doesn't lie. This groundbreaking study was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, which is sort of like the Nerd Olympics of journals. Leading the charge into this DNA detective story was geneticist Mark Stoneking from the Max Planck Institute in Germany. And yes, the name Stone King sounds like a Tekken character. Mark and his team performed a genome-wide comparison of 344 people from across the globe. Aboriginal Australians, Papua New Guineans, Southeast Asians, Indians, even a few Americans and Chinese thrown in for good measure. What they found are genetic breadcrumbs linking Indians to Northern Australians that were dropped about 141 generations ago. They double-checked the math, gasped a second time, and started phoning the press. You might have heard that after the first humans arrived in Australia around 45,000 years ago, the place went off-grid until Europeans landed in the 1700s. That version of history painted Australia as a giant, ancient do not disturb sign. Now this study throws that idea into a kangaroo-sized trash bin. And there's more. The DNA was the icing on the cake, but there is other proof. At the same time the mysterious Indian travelers arrived in Australia, two things happened. One, microliths started being used. These were tiny, sharp stone tools that acted as the Swiss Army knives of the ancient world. Two, dingoes showed up. And dingoes are believed to have originated in India, not Australia. I don't know why the Indians brought a bunch of dingoes on their ships and let them loose in Australia, but that seems to be what happened. Scientists now know that 4,000 years ago, people from the Indian subcontinent were advanced enough to colonize distant worlds. Maybe someone should do a study on Native Americans. Perhaps 11% of their DNA is from ancient Indians too. Could there have been more ancient voyages lost to time? The Irish monks who beat the Vikings to Iceland. History got it wrong. The Vikings? Not Iceland's first. New information is changing the game. It seems the Vikings may have been beaten to the icy island by a group of Irish monks. Not just any ordinary Irish monks either. These ones were known as the Paepar, a group so mysterious they hardly turn up in the ancient records. But there is mention of them in the Book of the Icelanders. It's a 12th century chronicle by Ari Thorgilsson the Wise, so he knows what's up. This ancient saga states that Christian men lived in Iceland before the Vikings showed up. These mysterious men, the Paepar, were pious, calm types who preferred caves over condos and prayer over plundering. But when the Norse settlers rolled in around 874 with their big weapons and even bigger egos, the Paepar took one look and said, "Hard pass." Can you blame them? They packed up their bells and their books and ghosted the island. What scientists are trying to do now is confirm that the island was indeed occupied by Irish monks. Just how far abroad did these ancient monks travel? There are even rumors that the Irish found North America before the Vikings. Near modern-day Keflavik in Iceland, archaeologists found the remains of a cabin. Amazingly, radiocarbon dating says the cabin was abandoned between 770 and 880 AD. That happens to be before the Norse officially moved in, which means that someone else lived in Iceland. It could have been early explorers from the British Isles or Scandinavia, maybe even seasonal squatters harvesting fish, bird eggs, and walrus mustaches. But it could also have been the very mystical Paepar. Evidence of these forgotten monks has even been found in icy caves. Local legend says the Paepar lived in the cave. And lo and behold, scientists found crosses carved into its walls, a telltale sign that the place was very likely used as a monk hangout. But what were the monks doing on the island? I can't think of a more isolated place to live 1,300 years ago. Where did they get their groceries? Even with the tangible evidence, critics say it's not enough to prove a whole population of Irish monks were in Iceland before it was cool. So what do you say? Did Irish monks and bloodthirsty Vikings have a meeting that history forgot to record? Why are we obsessed with sports? Ball is life. Sports have been a human obsession for as long as history remembers. I think you'll be quite surprised to learn just how connected the modern world of sports is to ancient human traditions. Let's meet one of the most famous ancient ball hogs. Saint Augustine of Hippo was born in 354 and died in 430 AD. He was a philosopher, theologian, and someone who loved to play ball. He once complained that his desire to play ball games slowed down his literary pursuits. And he wasn't the only one. If you'd taken a stroll through an ancient Greek or Roman city, odds are you'd spot people playing ball in the street. There were so many people playing sports in ancient Rome that the famous playwright Placius complained about it in the 3rd century BC. He'd had it up to here with all these dang hooligans. The most popular ancient ball game was a no-holds-barred team brawl called episkairos. Think football meets rugby meets I'm going to punch you in the face. 2 teams, 1 goal. Get the ball past the other team's line. Feet, hands, tackles, go nuts! If that sounds suspiciously like every Sunday league match you've ever seen, it's because humans have been inventing ways to smash into each other over a ball since forever. The games we play today are not all that different from the ones played by our distant friends in the past, minus a head or two. But who invented sports in the first place? And how did they spread between ancient cultures? Around the 8th century BC, the world's first New York Times bestseller, Homer, wrote his epic fable, The Odyssey. In it, there is a scene in which Nausicaa, princess of the Phaeacians, plays beach ball and sings karaoke. That's just another Wednesday night, at least for some people. Before the Greeks were hitting balls on the beach, the Egyptians were doing it. In the tomb of an Egyptian nobleman named Bakhet III, who died around 2150 BC, archaeologists found some very sporty artwork. The walls were decked out with images of women tossing balls. What game were they playing? Archaeologists don't have the foggiest clue. The point is that nothing has changed. The ancient love of play, competition, strength, glory, and ego is still alive and well. Whether you're screaming in a stadium, streaming World Cup highlights, or trying not to sprain your ankle at your neighborhood soccer game, you are participating in a tradition that spans eons. Do you think games are in our DNA? Jesus is a copycat. Out of all the stories in Greek mythology, there is one that sticks out like a centaur at a PTA meeting. It involves Zeus, a rogue almond, a hermaphroditic demon, and a resurrection that's about as convincing as a vampire selling sunscreen. The story is that of Attis, the ancient Phrygian deity whose myth some critics claim was the original Jesus myth. In other words, Jesus Christ was created as a character based on Attis. Jesus just so happened to become a whole heck of a lot more popular. It all began with Zeus, king of the gods and also the king of really nasty stuff. There's no non-creepy way for me to say this, so I'll just be an adult. The myth says that Zeus spilled his seed on the ground while he was sleeping. From this really weird accident, the being Agdistis was born. Agdistis boasted both male and female reproductive organs. The incredibly intolerant gods were disturbed by Agdistis and severed his male organ. From the discarded body part sprouted an almond tree. The Greeks were nothing if not vivid with their imagery, that's for sure. I don't even know what I'm going to show you in this part of the video. Then, many years later, the daughter of the river god Sangarius picked a fruit from the almond tree and tucked it into her bosom. 9 months later, she had baby Attis. To make a long story short, Attis grew up to be quite the ladies' man. He caught the eye of the goddess Cybele, but fell for a mortal woman instead. Furiously jealous, Cybele drove Attis to insanity, and he died in a pool of blood underneath a tree. Stricken by the horror she committed, Cybele realized she overreacted just a bit and begged the other gods for Attis's return. The gods agreed, and after 3 days, Attis was resurrected, which notably is often associated with the Feast of the Annunciation, commemorating the date of Jesus' conception. Interestingly, some traditions also link this date to the crucifixion. There are a lot of arguments surrounding the exact date of the events of Jesus' life, but March 25th is generally agreed to be the day of his conception and crucifixion. Historians argue it's an interesting coincidence that Attis was resurrected on the same day. And the story of Attis isn't even the only story that can be compared to the story of Jesus. We have Osiris from Egyptian mythology with his death and at least partial resurrection, Horus as well. Then we have Dionysus from Greek mythology, and then Adonis, and then the mysterious Mithras from Persian and Roman mythology. All of these stories tell of a virgin or miraculous birth, death, and resurrection. They are all divine sons and saviors known as King of all kings, and they all perform miracles. Of course, while they all have their common themes, their interpretation is always up for debate. Specific stories and details from the life of Jesus are very specific to the days of Christianity, but many wonder if any of these elements were borrowed from older cultures. Leprosy in America. You know what this video is missing? Lepers. Because apparently, leprosy is the connection between ancient civilizations that no one saw coming. But what even is leprosy? It's a disease that disfigures, damages nerves, and ultimately kills. Throughout European history, lepers were famously kicked out of cities and exiled. For the longest time, scientists believed this bacterial party crasher hitched a ride to the Americas with European colonizers and enslaved Africans about 500 years ago. But new information has proven that leprosy was already in the Americas before Columbus ever got a compass. And not just any leprosy either. The mysterious bacterial cousin that no one talks about at family reunions, Mycobacterium lepromatosis, it's the new leprosy on the block. Until recently, scientists thought there was only one strain of leprosy known as Mycobacterium leprae. Then, in 2008, researchers stumbled across M. lepromatosis in Mexico, a totally new kind of leprosy in the last place anyone expected to find it. In 2018, biologist Nicolas Raskovan and his team delved deep into ancient DNA databases and hit the microbial jackpot. They detected M. lepromatosis in the skeleton of someone who lived around 1000 AD, in what is now British Columbia, Canada. That person lived centuries before Europeans set sail with their muskets and measles. Two different leprosy strains, two different populations, and one very mean and humiliating disease. Raskovan also found more victims from 1,000 years ago in Argentina. That's a leprosy breadcrumb trail stretching almost 10,000 miles. The question remaining is this: who brought leprosy to the Americas? According to a new study published in the journal Science, M. lepromatosis likely emerged about 9,000 years ago in the Western Hemisphere. It had already split off from its cousin, M. leprae, a million years earlier, which makes them estranged bacterial siblings. That still doesn't answer the question of who brought it to the Americas 9,000 years ago. Somehow it spread from one continent to the other at a time when saber-toothed tigers still thought they'd make it. There must be a connection here, but what is it? Let me know what you think in the comments, and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. Roman coins in Japan? High atop a bluff in Okinawa, there is a medieval castle surrounded by sea mist curling around crumbling battlements. And here's something astonishing surfaced. Not a katana, not samurai armor, but Roman coins. Roman as in togas, Caesars, gladiators, and a two brute? What were ancient Roman pennies doing hanging out at a medieval Japanese castle like they were waiting for sushi and sake? Could two of history's most enduring cultures have had a connection that no one knew about? The mystery is set in Katsurin Castle, which was occupied between the 12th and 15th centuries. That was 1,000 years after Rome fell. Hidden in the earth, among the shards of pottery, 4 Roman coins were unearthed by archaeologists, plus 1 bonus Ottoman coin for good measure. One thing's for certain, a Roman soldier didn't lose his pocket change here. The Roman Empire was dead and gone by the 5th century AD, and Katsurin Castle wasn't built until 7 centuries after. This whole thing is like finding a Napoleonic musket inside a space shuttle. It just doesn't make any sense. To make it make sense, let's take a closer look at the coins. The clearest one is a copper alloy coin of Constantius II, son of Constantine the Great. It dates to around 337 to 361 AD. A few others look like they're from the same era. Don't go picturing gold-laden Roman trade ships docking in Okinawa Bay quite yet. These coins weren't gold or silver, they were small change, the Roman equivalent of the coins you find under your car seat. Not something worth dragging across the globe. They probably arrived at the castle the same way your grandma's souvenir spoon collection arrived in her cabinet, which is to say through centuries of curious collectors, middlemen, and traders who had no clue they had just created the world's most confusing archaeological puzzle. Experts believe the coins were lost in the castle's ruins by tourists who had picked the coins from somewhere else. Does this mean that Rome and Japan never met? Not necessarily. While they probably weren't texting each other about shipping routes, there were known trade links between Rome and India, Sri Lanka, and possibly Southeast Asia. Gold coins of Emperors Caligula and Nero have turned up in southern India, and there's evidence that Roman merchants made it to places like Vietnam and China by the 2nd century. One genuine Roman coin from the era of Emperor Victorinus between 268 and 270 was found in Thailand, of all places. Maybe the Romans never made it to Asia. Or maybe Roman merchants were sipping sake in Japan and practicing Muay Thai in ancient Pattaya. While I'm on the subject, it makes you wonder, who do you think would win? 10 samurai versus 10 Roman legionaries? Tell me in the comments. Yom Kippur and Pharaoh Akhenaten. As the last rays of sun slip behind the Mount of Olives and the city of Jerusalem exhales into golden silence, a single memorial candle flickers to life. It's Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Now, what if I told you this solemn day of fasting, repentance, and divine reflection may have its roots not only in ancient Israelite tradition, but 3,000 years ago in Pharaoh Akhenaten's Egypt? One of the biggest celebrations in Jewish tradition may have come from the Egyptians. Yom Kippur is the most sacred day in the Jewish calendar. 10 days after Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, it arrives like the grand finale of a fireworks show. Jews around the world mark the day by confessing sins, reciting ancient prayers, and avoiding all things fun, like eating, bathing, and leather shoes. Some of those traditions echo not just the Torah, but the rituals of Pharaoh Akhenaten, Egypt's infamous sun-worshipping heretic who ruled in the 14th century BC. Some historians even speculate that Akhenaten might have been Moses, or at least his historical doppelganger, and was even behind the creation of monotheistic religions like Christianity and Judaism. But this is a fringe theory, so let's not get too carried away. Anywho, during Yom Kippur, Jewish tradition says your name is written in God's book of life. It's a divine registry detailing who's in for a good year and who is getting spiritually audited. You've got 10 days to clean up your act before the heavenly Sharpie seals your fate. Guess who else was obsessed with books and the afterlife? Ancient Egyptians. Their version, the Book of the Dead, was a DIY guide to eternal life, complete with cheat codes, spells, and a scale-based heart-weighing ritual. If your heart was lighter than a feather, you earned eternal bliss. But if your heart was too heavy with sins, your soul was devoured by a demon, hippo, lion, crocodile hybrid named Amit. The Jewish tradition of Vidui is very similar. The Vidui is a confessional prayer where worshippers pound their chests and confess 44 sins in a row. The heart is center stage in both systems. Do you think it's a coincidence or spiritual recycling? Yom Kippur may be a fast day, but the meals before and after are a foodie's dream. Chicken and fish tend to be on the menu, and Pharaoh Akhenaten was also throwing elaborate fish feasts. But to be fair, who doesn't after a day of sacrifice and fasting? Excavations at his ancient capital of Amarna revealed polychrome glass fish vessels, fish on a stick scenes, and family feasts that wouldn't look out of place at a modern Jewish breakfast. Let's not forget the chickens either. Kapparot is an ancient Jewish ritual in which a chicken is swung over your head to symbolically transfer your sins onto the bird. Now flip over a limestone block from Akhenaten's palace, and what do we see? The pharaoh himself, offering a duck in a posture almost identical to the Kapparot ritual. Chickens weren't even in Egypt yet, so ducks were their go-to atonement bird. Different birds, same ritual. Could Akhenaten have really been Moses? And could he have taken Egyptian rituals and transferred them to his newly created religion across the peninsula into the Promised Land? Maybe. Or maybe Akhenaten was ahead of his time in spiritual poultry management. There's one more coincidence I have to share with you. Yom Kippur also includes the Yizkor, a powerful memorial service where candles are lit, names are remembered, and connections between the living and dead are honored. To the Egyptians, memory was everything. They believed that being forgotten was a kind of second death. It's why their tombs were filled with offerings, prayers, and inscriptions begging future generations to say their names. It's possible that someone took the Egyptian idea of surviving through memory and turned it into the official ritual of Yizkor. The traditions of Judaism and ancient Egypt might have taken different roads, but they may have started in the same ancient place. And if you go back far enough, we all may have started from the same ancient place, with handbags, gods, rituals, and traditions. Thanks for watching! Which two cultures do you think were far more connected than history tells us? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!